I'm sure you've heard the buzz about AI agents, but what is an agent exactly? And why is it important for your business? I think that AI agents could be transformative, but only if you understand what they are and also their strengths and weaknesses. So, in this video, I'll explain what AI agents are, how agents work, some strengths, weaknesses, and use cases, and why they're set to reshape business operations over the next decade. Hi, I'm Joshua Ebner. I'm a 20-year expert in AI, machine learning, and data science. Let's get into it. So, first, let's talk about what an AI agent is in plain English. An AI agent is a system that thinks, decides, and acts typically towards some sort of goal, and it does that without human intervention. Now, there are situations where you're going to include a human in the loop. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But an AI agent is essentially sort of like a system that thinks and takes actions independently towards a particular goal. Now, an AI agent typically has a large language model at its core, and the LLM acts like the thinking and reasoning engine. So it takes in the goal, it takes in context, it makes plans, makes a decision about what exactly to do, the best course of action, and then it begins executing on that with tools and other systems that are available. So you can think of an AI agent almost as like an artificial employee or an artificial human that can make plans and take actions towards a goal given other tools and systems. Next, now that we've talked about what an AI agent is, let me very quickly distinguish an AI agent from an LLM because they're related, but they are a little bit different and separate. A large language model, an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude, you can typically think of an LLM like a text generator. LLMs work very well typically with text-based inputs, and they generate text-based outputs. This can be very useful for question and answer sessions using a large language model sort of as an advisor. You can use LLMs to summarize documents or analyze text, but really what an LLM does is it takes the input text and then predicts the next word, the next token in a sequence. So it's basically predicting the next token and then the next one and then the next one, ultimately producing a piece of text as an output. Now, this can work very well, like I said, for certain types of translation or summarization or question and answer tasks. But large language models all by themselves do not do work particularly well. This is where an AI agent comes in. You can take a large language model and begin to give it tools and access to systems like databases and vector stores for additional information or additional context related to the problem. You can give it access to APIs for other pieces of software. And these additional tools and systems give the large language model additional capacity to actually perform work. Then the LLM essentially acts like a reasoning or a planning engine with additional capabilities to take action towards a particular goal. Importantly, though, you can think of an AI agent as a strongly enhanced large language model, and this requires quite a bit of engineering. So as I said, you need to be able to give it access to all of the other tools and systems that it might need. But then on top of that, you typically need to give it certain types of guardrails so it takes the right actions and refrains from taking bad actions. You often need to train AI agents, and that requires training examples. This is just a way of saying it needs data. So, for example, if you give an AI agent different tools, you often need to give it examples for how to use those particular tools. Or if you're asking it to perform work in a particular workflow, you often need to show an AI agent what good outputs actually look like. So there's quite a bit of curation that needs to happen for training examples to train the agent to perform properly. Moreover, you need to do system engineering, things like setting the AI agent up so that it can receive inputs, process those inputs, and then produce outputs and send those outputs perhaps back to a human or a different system. This is something similar to traditional DevOps in software engineering. We would probably now call this AI ops or machine learning operations. You need to have ongoing monitoring systems. And as I suggested a little bit previously, you very often need to have what we call a human in the loop to monitor the outputs or to be available for particularly tricky problems or questions that the AI agent cannot handle independently. So, as opposed to just a strict LLM that you can kind of use off the shelf and give it text based inputs, ask it questions, give it documents, and things like that, AI agents often require a lot more AI engineering in order to work properly. Very quickly, let's talk about some use cases inside of a business. We have things like customer support, essentially fielding support requests from customers, analyzing those support requests, and either going to a system to find a resolution and solving the problem directly, or figuring out a plan and maybe escalating that support request to a human being. This is an example of human in the loop. You can use AI agents for research, essentially asking an AI agent questions. It might have access to internal documentation, but for a research agent, it's probably going to have access to the internet as well, processing the question, putting together a plan for identifying the right sources, searching through those sources, gathering the right information, and weaving together a report to give to the user or client. There are currently sales agents. Typically, these sales agents act like sales development reps, SDRs. In a sales organization, an SDR is typically a frontline sales employee that builds prospect lists, gathers information about those prospects, the prospective customers, generates initial outbound emails that are tailored to those prospective customers, very frequently contacts them for the first time, sending the email, getting a response, qualifies the customer, and then logs some of the information about the interaction in a CRM system. And then usually once the prospect is qualified, the SDR will send that information to a more advanced sales rep that will continue the sales conversation. A lot of these steps can be automated with an AI agent system, although imperfectly, but I have seen even small businesses generate their own SDR agents, essentially sales agents, to do a lot of this frontline sales work. And then we have coding agents, essentially an AI agent system that writes code, tests it, debugs it, and then maybe sends it back to a software engineer. And in many cases, I think going forward, software engineers are going to be managing teams of coding agents. So the software engineer figures out what needs to be built and plans out a rough architecture, then sends coding tasks to AI agents. The agent sends it back. The human software engineer starts weaving that code together into a larger system that can then be further tested, debugged, and refined as a collective piece of code. So these are only a couple of examples of AI agents. And I will say that although some of these systems currently work now, they do have limitations. So let's talk about that. AI agents have a variety of limitations right now, especially around things like training, cost, reliability, and general risk. So first, with respect to training, I suggested this earlier, but it's really important. AI agents often need to be trained. I think I said previously that AI agents are kind of like artificial employees. If you get a new employee into your business, you need to train them, right? You need to train them to operate inside of a particular workflow. You need to train them to respond to requests a certain way, to conform to internal policies, and maybe to use certain types of tools. That's true of a human being. It is also true of an AI agent. You often need to train agents to use tools to conform to policies, to do things the right way. They often do not do things the right way the first time out. So you need to collect what we call training examples that show an AI agent what good looks like, what correct looks like. This actually relates to another key limitation of AI agents is that they are unreliable without that training. I think everyone is familiar at this point with AI hallucinations when a large language model very confidently says something that's factually untrue. Well, this sort of hallucination can also happen when it is gathering information, generating outputs, generating plans, or even using tools. It can attempt to use a tool in the wrong way. So AI agents without proper training can often hallucinate, and this can have a variety of negative effects. There are also issues around general risk because AI agents can misbehave, they can hallucinate, they can use tools the wrong way. There are a variety of potential problems where an AI agent might actually take an action that is outside of policy, maybe even produce an output that is embarrassing in a public way. We've actually seen this with AI systems in the past, like Microsoft and X.com, where an AI system kind of started misbehaving and saying or doing things that were maybe a little bit inappropriate. Furthermore, if you're giving an AI agent access to systems like databases or document stores, you have to be very careful that an AI agent only gets access to information that it should have access to. So there's a whole set of privacy issues. There's also risks around overwriting data. So if you give an agent write access to a database, it could potentially overwrite or even delete some of your data in your database. So you have to be very, very careful. That extends beyond databases also to things like folder systems, document stores. So there's a variety of reputational risks, privacy risks, data access, and risks around overwriting or deleting data. And then there's also cost. When you build an AI system, typically you need to do something called inference. So you build the system to operate in a particular way, but then when you send it requests and ask it to actually perform work, that processing, the sort of digital processing performed by the agentic system, is done on a piece of hardware. It processes the request, takes the actions that it needs to take, and then sends the output back to the user. We call that inference. Inference is very common with almost all AI systems. In fact, every time you go to, let's say, ChatGPT and give it a question, as it's processing, trying to figure out how to answer, and then it generates the answer and sends it back to you, that is inference. Well, if you're doing that with an AI agent, that costs money. Every time you send a request and you initialize processing on a piece of hardware, sometimes that's local, sometimes that's in the cloud, that processing costs money. And sometimes it can cost a lot of money. So you need to be very careful about the potential inference costs associated with running the system. There's also a couple of other limitations, things like skills that are needed internally to build agents. This can be very challenging, and you need people with the right set of skills related to data and agent training, machine learning, AI ops, and a variety of other things. So you do need to understand that there are risks and costs and potential challenges if you want to use agents inside of your business. So here, I've given you a pretty broad overview of what an AI agent is and how they work, their potential strengths and limitations. But there's a lot of things that I left out. Things like exactly how agentic systems are trained, how they're architected, the sorts of engineering that you'll need to do. I've left out a lot of details just because we don't have time to cover it all in this video. But don't worry, I'm going to do separate videos on all of those topics later on. So if you want the complete picture, make sure to subscribe. Furthermore, if you want help figuring out how to integrate AI agents into your business, I help businesses design AI strategies. Look for the link in the video description if you want to connect. So that's the quick introduction to AI agents for business leaders. What do you think? Are you excited to use AI agents in your business? Have you tried and maybe failed? Are there maybe some sticking points that you're still trying to figure out? I really want to hear from you. Leave a comment below.